Nothing makes me happier nowadays when I get emails that are like, this has changed because like we have to do this because of the CBA. Like I'm like, great, things are getting better. Like it may make it my job harder, but I'm pumped about it because I'm like, they fought for. I mean, people don't even realize we haven't talked about like 6 or 7 things, but this is like a huge. There's so many line items of things that are going to improve. So I want to get into that little. I'm glad to hear that you kind of had in that a little bit in terms of the dash and being a part of it. One, talk about like if you can and want, like just kind of that process for you. And then also like, do you think to your point when you said like it wasn't your dream to be a professional player, do you feel a little bit more stability as a player going into this season, knowing that like certain standards are going to be better, there is longevity with the league, that you can feel comfortable that you're going to have a job? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So obviously part of the negotiations, there's so many nuances. So like, for instance, like a simple example, we're at one point kicking around a tiered system for minimum wage. And I was like, it sounds good because obviously you want to honor those that have come before us. I was like, however, if you have a player that's close to aging out, I know how the NWSL works. They'll probably make them retire because they're not going to want to pay them more. So I was like, we got to rethink that just a little bit. And hopefully, a lot of people aren't living on the minimum. Unfortunately, I think it was like something 90% or 80 to 90% of the league is on the minimum. But then obviously we had agreed to the minimum like months and months ago, but then towards the end of the negotiations, it became apparent, obviously, when other people in the bargaining staff were negotiating new contracts, that they're like, well, if we have the new minimum, we're not sure what we can give you. And then I was sitting back going, oh God, are they going to cut corners and do like a minimum roster, which I know could happen. So then we obviously started kicking around ideas of like, okay, well, we have to have like a bare minimum roster number that they can't go below, because I have a feeling some clubs will try their best.
15 players, you're like, one injury, it's over.
Right. I mean, you got to think of the incentives, and this in finance. You're like, well, how do we make people do what we need them to do? So it was a difficult process. Obviously, there's a lot of opinions on things. Sometimes, and it's, Joe, I appreciate you acknowledging like I had to work several jobs, because it did put a fire in my chest to be like, no, like we can't have this anymore where like trialists come in for an extended period of time. Like it has to end. And then like same thing if someone gets drafted, I'm like, they have to get service years if they're not getting employed, because it's not fair that they're still being held indefinitely without pay. So it's just like all these little different things started coming together. And obviously I would refer to myself as the free agency hound, because I was always on the free agency side being like, free agency, stick it to the man, but like not in a bad way. Just like, I think that there's a lot of benefits to free agency, and I saw it in the Super League. And, and the perspective isn't like, oh, I want to make everyone's, pockets bleed. It's, I want what's best for the future of the league. And I want to be able to give people a fair wage as well as attract the best international talent. So it's like, we can't set, you know what I'm saying? And then I don't know. I just, a lot of it.
It makes me really, really happy though, that like there's different voices from, there's national team voices, there's longtime veteran voices, but to know that like you have been a voice in all of this as somebody that experienced everything we experienced together in that short period of time, that there is a voice for, that little segment of a group that sometimes gets really, really screwed. But if you haven't been screwed by it, you really don't even know it even existed. Yeah. So for you to be able to have that voice through this whole process makes me, Joe Boyles, 4 years ago, at peace, so that nobody kind of has to go through what we went through during that time, because it wasn't healthy.
It's definitely coming together collectively. That's so hard. Like, I don't think people even realize that. Like, she's speaking on her experiences, and you have a national team player who's speaking on their experiences, and more people are going to have more things they're willing to give up, and yada, yada. It's like to find no one's ever going to be perfectly happy, but to come together as women and say, okay, like we're comfortable with this, and then hold them to that. I'm like, that's like something like when you're older, I think you should tell, your kids or your family. Like I was a part of something that, really is going to benefit so many people over so much time that you should be really proud.
Yeah, I was surprised, honest, when I first volunteered, obviously, and let me backtrack a little bit first though. Like I will say, like, obviously people don't really understand certain circumstances when they're not directly affected by it. But when it was brought forward, a lot of people were so excited to get on board and support those things, because obviously it's important that we have a healthy, sustainable league. So that was the coolest part about all of it, is seeing everybody really work. Like you could tell there's like a share it. I've never felt so, how do I say this? United, I guess you could say, with so many different groups. Like I could say I'm probably good pals in terms of, you know, cause you get on the little text threads with a lot of girls in the league, which normally I would never have interacted with ever on the soccer pitch, probably, and would probably be enemies on the field. But you know, it was cool. It was an awesome experience. But obviously, like moving forward, I'm just like hoping that it just builds towards like a sustainable future. And it's just like super exciting, because even I got a friend that works like in the Yankees organization, and he texted me a few days after and was like, "Hey, did you know you just made history?" And I was like, what? Because originally when I signed up for it, I was like, I'm hell-bent on making sure what happened to me doesn't happen again. And so that's my biggest concern moving forward. And that we all, and my experience in England was really eye-opening, because they mirror the Premier League. So they're very far advanced in terms of like their systems in place. And so I have a perspective of hopefully to what our PA can be, because I was part of the PA there. So I'm hoping that we can build it out even further in terms of services for players. But long story short, it just, how do I say this? It was a good experience to just like build out, I guess, the CBA and be part of history, because I hadn't intended that to be the case. It just was like,
because when you do something for the pure goodness and the trueness of who you like, for the goodness of the, what am I trying to say?
You're doing it for if you're doing it as a mission for a group of women in which you're a part of. It's you don't think about what it's going to do in 30 days. You're thinking about right now, where can we get on the negotiating table and push this through?
Exactly.
Because I want to play soccer and not be working 3 jobs. That's the mindset.
Yeah.
So.